Live stream audio test. 1 2 1 2.
Call the room to order so we can get started because we have reached 2:30. It's nice to have a packed room today. Obviously lots of important subjects on the agenda and it's pleased to have so many colleagues present to listen and participate in our discussions. So just to remind everyone, this is obviously the meeting of the North Somerset Council Executive. We do stream this meeting on YouTube and it's available for download afterwards. And we will have some colleagues who may be seeking to participate in the meeting via Teams. So we'll try and monitor the Teams chat as well if anyone wants to contribute to the discussions through that channel. I'll ask my executive colleagues to just introduce themselves, just to remind everyone who they are. So my name's Mike Bell, I'm the leader of council and chair the executive, and then James.
James Clayton, executive member for safety in the community.
Councillor Mark Hannaford, the executive member for spatial planning, placemaking and economy.
Mike Solomon, executive member for arts and leisure.
Hannah Young, executive lead for highways and transport.
Catherine Gibbons, executive member for children's services, lifelong learning and skills.
Jenna Homaris is the executive lead for homes, health and equalities, and I'm representing Pill Ward.
Annamika Waite, and I'm the executive member for climate waste and sustainability.
Roger Whitfield, and I'm the executive member for adult services and stronger communities.
Great, thank you very much, colleagues. So before we commence with the agenda, just let me give notice that we will be slightly reordering the items on the agenda this afternoon. So items 10 and 11 on the bus service improvement plan will take at the end of the agenda for reasons which will become apparent when we get to it. So just to give colleagues notice of that. Okay, so the first item I've got on the list is addresses by members of the public. We've had one request from Mr. Alan Rice. So Alan, if you want to come to a microphone and address us, and you've got 3 minutes. I don't know why we always make people sprint all the way to the front, Alan. It seems a bit unnecessary, doesn't it? But anyway. Yeah. But thank you.
Good afternoon, Leader, Councillors. For those who do not know me, my name is Alan Rice and I assist tenants, usually in private rent, in problems with their landlords, mostly on these days those facing eviction. Today I would like to talk about digital exclusion and the added stress it places on those seeking social housing through home choice. In a consultation document on housing strategy held from September to November 2021, the numbers on the home choice household waiting list were 2,700, with approximately 140 applications every month. Yet at the same time, the North Somerset Council website stated there were about 3,300 households on the waiting list, with over 300 applications each month. Where had the 600 on the waiting list gone? And why had the number applying halved? It was worse than that. When I queried why the numbers differed, the response I received was, I'm told that when home choice migrated to Jigsaw, we indeed lost a lot of applicants, a drop from around 3,500 to 1,700, which we have steadily built up since. So the numbers halved on a change of software. If that was not digital exclusion, I do not know what is. And why? Certainly, a part of the reason was the new software required an email address, which so many of those seeking social housing do not possess. Indeed, a lot of my time is creating email addresses so that the most vulnerable can bid. Even if you have an email address, the application is not easy, especially when you use a phone, which is the norm nowadays. Here is one lady's comment. Hating doing this, it was a nightmare. Trying to do on a mobile phone, with learning difficulties, it was not much fun. I had no idea exactly how to answer some of the questions, but done to the best of my ability, as was mobile, had to keep going back, trying to see the screen on the one before. It was awful, and wouldn't let you pass to the next part. Sometimes the amount of times I had to retry was so frustrating, and uploading, when not technical, I had to watch a YouTube video on how to download different apps and find out what apps to try to scan from mobile, then had to try to get the right format to upload, which meant downing a OneDrive to send from scanning app. I had ended up naming each one individually to send, so I knew what they were. The whole process was a giant nightmare. 7 hours it took trying to upload evidence. Finally, in the end, I did it, but it should never be so hard. Another lady who has gained a GNVQ, which includes IT, comments, it was a nightmare trying to do this on my mobile phone yesterday. It also asks for loads of passports and birth certificates, but people don't always have them. During the process, she measured me several times. Alan, what do they mean by settled accommodation, please? It's okay, I think I figured it out. I'm still gradually going through the application, hoping I'm doing it right. It keeps not wanting to say the information on my youngest. Okay, I'm on Jigsaw. I need to find some more documents to upload. I don't have my own birth certificate, but I do have a passport. I also don't have a passport for my 2 youngest children. I'm hoping I've done it all properly. It's really tricky on the phone. I've attempted 8 times to upload my passport to Jigsaw now, and it's failed each time. It was an interesting question. What do they mean by settled accommodation? Anyone know? It always stumps me when I assist someone in completing the application. According to a housing barrister's website, the phrase settled accommodation appears nowhere in the Housing Act 1996, but it's a concept that has been developed by the courts in relation to the issue of intentional homelessness. Lord Justice Patton, in a court appeal case, confirmed that in most cases accommodation granted pursuant to an assured short-hold tenancy, where there is no indication at the start of the tenancy that there is no prospect of renewal, would amount to settled accommodation. He noted it might seem odd that a period of accommodation which lasted for over 2 years could be regarded as temporary, whereas an assured short-hold tenancy which lasted for significantly less than 2 years would usually be regarded as settled. As it's not in the Housing Act 1996, it would seem an unnecessary question which only confuses. At least changing the phrase to, "Are you in temporary accommodation?" would make it easier to understand. The home choice application form needs to be simplified. There must be a mobile-friendly version. The number of documents needed needs to be reduced, and there must be an alternative to applying online. And then we can start to meet the needs of those that are digitally excluded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alan. I will ask my colleague, Councillor Jenna Homaris, who obviously is our exec member for Homes and Health, to contact you to discuss some of those detailed points that you've raised. I think it's, lots of good points there, but I think it is worth noting that there is absolutely support available for people who are digitally excluded, and there are other ways to access support from our housing and homelessness team. So I wouldn't want to leave people thinking that applicants are left to their own devices, but nevertheless there's lots of very valid and constructive points that you've raised, and I'm sure that we will look into those and come back to you. Okay, thank you very much. So the next item is apologies for absence, and there are none because we're all here, so that's good. Item 3, declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests. Are there any from colleagues? No? Okay, thank you. Item 4 is the minutes of the last meeting on the 6th of September. So I'll move approval of those as a correct record. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Caniford. Everyone in support of those? Yeah, thank you. Okay, item 5 is non-executive councillors' addresses. We have had no requests in advance, so we'll move on. Items 6 and 7, which are matters referred to the executive, not dealt elsewhere, and the West of England sub-region, there are none, so we'll move on to item 8, which is the forward plan. So that's the latest version of the forward plan, which I would obviously draw colleagues' attention to. That's just for noting, so unless anyone has got any questions or comments on that, can't see any, so I'll move on to item 9, which is the North Somerset local plan pre-submission version. So I will hand over to Councillor Caniford to move the report and introduce this item, and I'm aware that Councillor Jenna Homaris also has an additional amendment to move. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move the recommendations for support, but I'll speak to that first if I may. First of all, I would like to give a thank you to our strategic planning team. Without doubt, Richard Kent, Michael Reep and the team who have joined him, who are here today to answer any technical questions, without doubt have worked so hard on this plan. We've pushed it backwards and forwards, and they've accommodated councillors and members of the public to try and fulfil everyone's needs, and I really do appreciate the work they've done. We started this process of engagement in 2020, and this is the version that will be submitted ultimately to the independent inspector for examination following the consultation and any amendments that are deemed appropriate and necessary. We do have an uncertain national picture. Government have suggested reforms, but nothing has yet been confirmed. But we do need to have a local plan in place to give certainty to our communities and to reduce any risk of appeals and unwanted development. The plan will be for our need for 15 years. It will go from 2024 to 2039, and will concentrate its growth in the towns where we do have a good range of services and facilities. The plan does reflect the constrained nature of North Somerset and the development areas, and recognises the areas in risk of flooding and green belt that we need to make sure we minimise any development, as people's lives are affected by this. Our housing target was set by government at over 20,000 dwellings, but our own housing need assessment identifies the need of 14,902 homes. The government has also signalled that councils can identify their own need. We have been able to review the preferred options consultation in light of this, reflect on the feedback, and that feedback in the consultation. I'd like to again thank those who did feedback and took the time to be involved. And we have removed the green belt sites. The same goes for the same housing needs assessment has also identified the need to maximise affordable housing. And this plan will propose 38.5% for greenfield sites and 20% for previously developed land, but that amendment will be made and Jenna will speak to that later. The scale of development for Nelsey and Backwell has been significantly reduced due to the infrastructure constraints, and I know that will be welcomed by those communities. A green belt has also been proposed between South West Nelsey and Backwell, and a strategic gap between Sanford and Churchill. The preferred options identified 3 sites for strategic growth, but we now only have the one. Wolvers Hill, north of Banwell, will include 2,800 dwellings, employment and a local centre. There will be nearby jobs, services and transport links to this strategic site. The plan has identified the need for further employment, and at this point I'd like to thank our partners who have engaged with us and had their input in terms of employment. Land at the north of the district at Junction 20 in Clevedon has been proposed. It has very good road network and an available workforce. Some settlement boundaries have also been reviewed. The current strategy allows development adjacent to settlement boundaries, but this will be replaced with development within settlement boundaries will be acceptable. Elsewhere will be strictly controlled. The pre-submission document will go to consultation at the end of November, with submission to the Secretary of State in April and examination next summer-autumn. And we will be seeking adoption by the Council at the end of this year. This is important because currently we are getting to a scenario where we are finding it or not giving our officers the tools to control development. Officers will also have the opportunity to review the proportion of affordable housing to make sure that we have how we proportionate the affordable housing to make sure we meet the local need of what is required by our communities. So please support this pre-submission so we can move one step closer to a workable plan to protect us from unwanted development in North Somerset and to give our planners and our partners the tools that they need to continue work. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. And I'll invite Jenna to move the additional recommendation. Jenna.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, councillors and officers here and anyone joining. I don't think anyone's joining online. So can I just briefly thank Mark as the lead member for the local plan, and of course also the officers, particularly Michael Weep and Richard Ken, Jenny Ford, and many, many others for their time counted in years coming up with this version for this very last consultation and then advocating it for it before the inspector. The amendment I propose, they are one, which is affordable housing. Chair, should I read this out or what?
Yeah, I think if you can do, that would be helpful.
Okay, so policy, it would read, Policy DP43, which relates to affordable housing, is amended to increase the proportion of affordable housing sought on greenfield sites to 38.5% to reflect the overall proportion of affordable housing need identified in the local housing needs assessment. Officers are asked to consider the most effective delivery of that percentage, including consideration of grant input where appropriate. And the second amendment is on embodied carbon. Policy DP6 net zero construction is amended to specify a target for embodied carbon within new buildings in order to provide clarity on how the policy requirement is delivered. Officers are asked to identify an appropriate standard using the approach recently adopted in the Bath and North East Somerset Local Plan Partial Review as the starting point. So if I can just speak to those briefly. So the detailed wording will be worked on by officers. We will agree this and can be agreed on a later date. I'm happy with the draft that I've seen of the wording. And this wording includes limiting embodied carbon to 900 kilos of carbon dioxide equivalent per metre squared on large developments, and which is the same as Bath and North East Somerset. So, in proposing these amendments, I mean, the background, from what I see, we're a small but perfectly formed unitary authority, and in the face of quite a hostile national government, it sometimes feels like there's so much that North Somerset can't do. We can't reinstate HS2, we can't or push through the delayed Renters Reform Bill. Hopefully that will be heard next week in Parliament. And we can't do U-turns on the U-turns so that people can enjoy clean air and renters can enjoy warm homes. But what we can do is invest in the Portishead Pill Bristol railway line. We can introduce landlord licensing, and we can plan for our future in this local plan, which we want to be open and fair and green, and there's so much more that we can do. As Mark mentioned, this local plan will carry us into the next 15 years. This is through our local net zero 2030 commitments and well into our national net zero 2050 commitments. It has to be backed by evidence and it has to be viable, which means it's likely to be built. And that is an assessment looking at house prices and cost of building. With no updated local plan, we risk letting through outdated, unsuitable, unwanted and damaging developments which residents have clearly told us and that they do not want. But we also need to make sure it's something we can stand behind to set out ambitions for the kind of development we want during these crucial years to turn around the climate, biodiversity and inequality crises. There's a lot of good stuff in this plan. In particular, there's our ambition to build net zero carbon homes, so operational carbon, running them, so that they don't rely on fossil fuels, they're healthier to live in and cost less to run. All new homes as well will be adaptable, and 5% must be wheelchair accessible. But on affordable housing, the local housing needs assessment says people in North Somerset need 38.5% affordable housing, at least. We already know that there's an affordable housing crisis. If people need 38.5% affordable housing, my group and I could not stand behind a 35% affordable housing target. I understand the reason why we can't push for an even higher affordable housing is the viability report we commissioned, which shows it doesn't pay developers to deliver affordable housing in the parts of our area where we want to build. That assumes a 20 to 30% profit margin, and that house prices remain depressed as in our current economy. So what I want to see is the council taking on that role ourselves to build the housing that we need, to support the developers that share our vision, which is much more social housing, much more accessible housing, and housing that people can actually afford. And what we need is a national government that will support local councils to do this, and not one that undermines us. On embodied carbon, we are doing a lot on how homes are heated in this plan, but I think we can do better on what homes are built from, because concrete, steel, glass, brick, these are carbon-hungry materials. And it's not just about carbon. The construction industry's use of sand and gravel, supposedly, according to the OECD, is more than all fossil fuels and metal combined by weight. It's forecast to double over the next 40 years. You have sand exports used in concrete being banned by many countries. Much of it is actually now controlled by mafia. On the other hand, there is material called cross-laminated timber, which is just wood. And it can actually take place of structural concrete and steel in some situations. The Paris Olympics buildings are being almost built, very much with timber. This amendment brings us up to the standard already adopted by Bath and North East Somerset and others, and this we need to show leadership and demand for low-carbon materials and to kickstart the circular economy. So with every home we build, we could be locking in carbon, we could be increasing training for skilled local jobs, generating local energy, supporting healthier people and communities. It's a triple win for people, climate and nature. So colleagues, I hope you will support these amendments. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Jenna. So just to be completely clear, we've got two additional recommendations that sit with the recommendations that were published in the paper. So the first one relates to increasing the affordable housing target on greenfield sites from 35% as set out in the published papers to 38.5%. And the second is around stronger wording in support of tackling embodied carbon through our policies. So I think that those recommendations are being accepted into the main proposal. So I'll just ask for a seconder, and then I'm happy to take questions and comments. So Councillor Gibbons has seconded that. So first speaker I've got is Councillor Steve Bridger.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a few comments, which I'll try and go through briefly. First of all, I'd like to add my thanks to officers. They do an absolutely fantastic job in this area. I also support, I think I've said before, the council using the locally derived housing requirements as the basis for the local plan. I think it's very sound and based on really good evidence, a really excellent report. I'm a little bit nervous about the level of windfall sites that are expected to come forward in the villages. If I'm perfectly honest, developers potentially can leap over the green belt and target speculatively green fields around the villages. So I hope that when the time comes, we will consider applications against our policies, which look as if they're going to be really, really sound, robustly. I hope we consider applications robustly against those policies. I noticed that there was a House of Commons debate yesterday on the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill, and the Housing Minister, Rachel McLean, confirmed, I think it was a question that actually came from Liam Fox, confirmed that the changes to the MPPF, the long-awaited changes to the MPPF, will be published as soon as the bill receives royal assent. Now, I think there was a debate yesterday. I think there's another one on Monday. We're pretty much there, so that bill is going to get royal assent really quickly. So the MPPF you'd expect to be pretty much, they're just probably crossing the T's and dotting the I's at the moment. So I'm happy with the delegation to Mark and Director of Place recommendation 2 that if that does pop out in the next week or two, you will look at that obviously closely and ensure that there are no surprises there and it aligns with what we're putting forward out for public consultation. So I don't know whether there's a tricky timing issue around that one. Something that concerns me a little bit is obviously there's reference in this to several documents that are going to be coming forward around which we'll be going out to public consultation on with the substantive document. One of those is the infrastructure delivery plan. Now, to me, that along with the housing need document and evidence, this is the other really big one. Really important document. I don't think we've seen it yet. I don't know whether elected members will get to see the infrastructure delivery plan prior to it being published with the public consultation documents. As I say, it's a pretty key document. It would be good if we could have sight of that before it goes out to the general public. Final point I wanted to make, Chair, was around, again, timings. With planning, obviously, everything seems to stay the same for a bit until it doesn't. So, in terms of the local plan, obviously, it's got to correctly reflect government guidance, as it says, I think, in the report. Government guidance at the time. So, given that we're some way still from adoption, we're looking at examination potentially next autumn. There's something else that might potentially happen next autumn, which is the general election. And I'm bound to make the comment that while Liam Fox would, I think, support where we're taking this as a council in terms of the trajectory of the local plan, rather perversely, this might become a real election issue for a couple of our administration parties who are actually debating whether or not to restore compulsory housing targets for local areas. So, yeah, that might be an interesting one next autumn. I'm not sure whether things like examinations of local plans get put on hold if, in a pre-election period, and what might happen to our local plan if it's then out of line with any incoming government who want to change planning policy. Again, we might in the future come up against those sorts of issues, but generally speaking, I'm very supportive of what's being put forward, and thank Mark for presenting the report and for the officers, as I said at the beginning, for all the work that they've done. Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Steve. There was a few technical points that I think are probably useful for clarification on. So whether Richard or Michael want to just comment, one on the infrastructure plan and what the expectation is in terms of sharing that with members, and secondly, what would happen in the event that we're in the inspection process and a change of government comes along. Richard Kent is our head of planning.
Thanks, Chair. So in terms of that latter point regarding a change of government, that in itself would have no bearing. It's whether national planning policy changes as a consequence of that, and we would have to adapt and adjust to whatever change might come forward through that process. And if it was during the examination, the inspector would doubtless give opportunity for us to consider and make amendments, and some of the other parties. In terms of the infrastructure delivery plan, that's something we are actively working on, and it will come to Mark Caniford as the executive member initially, and then I'm sure it will be made available to the wider executive and others to look at. So that is work in progress, and be conscious that it is something that people do want to see.
Thank you very much, Richard. Okay,
and Mike, just to add to that, just for the other question, so it's not forgotten, in terms of village development, of course, the village boundaries have been reviewed, and any development outside those boundaries will be fought against.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Councillor Terry Porter next.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to compliment the planning office as well on what I think looks like a much more acceptable local plan than we've had before. I think it is more viable than the 21,000. It still will be challenging because it's still building more houses than we've done over the last 10 or 15 years. But what I really want to do, I went through the report that you had from the Opinion Research Services, and to be honest, when I looked through that, I thought it was very convincing in coming up the numbers of 14,000. And I hope that when it does go for inspection, this will be seriously looked at. But I remember back when I sat in the inquiry when our plan got changed the last time, funny enough, 14,000 was about the number of houses that we put forward then, that we thought were acceptable. And we sat in that inquiry, and the inspector just come afterwards and said, no, it's got to be 20,800, with no real justification for that, which I felt was quite unfortunate. So I don't know if you've done any inquiries with the inspector and that to see what this new process would be. To me, it looked very convincing that they were the right sort of numbers. Just the other thing I wanted to mention was affordable housing. Now, again, I think this is another very difficult one because, unfortunately, the not financially viable bit comes in all the time. I've sat in here when we've had inquiries with the going against our planning refusal, saying, yes, we'll give you 30% affordable housing. And I can quote several sites. That was said quite clearly, and they made a big effort on it. They got planning for it. And then what happens is they start to build it. They come back and say it's not financially viable, and we get 10 or 15%. It's unfortunate that that isn't legally enforceable. Now, I don't think it'll ever be changed to be that, but that is really difficult with it. And then there was just one other thing on an actual practical bit in there, which I just wanted to raise with Mark. At the last P&R, we had the application come up for Congsbury, which was for 90 houses, which wasn't included in any formal plans. My concern is that in this one, that for Pineapple Farm is still indicated on there as a possibility for 70 houses. Now, this is going out as a plan that is put forward by North Somerset. And I think, you know, we had 12 councillors in here, all 12 of us voted against that particular site, you know, and it was overwhelming, the vote for it. Now, I'm just concerned that that's in there now, still in there, and if that goes out for the consultation with that in there, then the implication to me, if I was an inspector, is that generally it's accepted, but there's a few that turned against it. So I do have a great concern. It's not my area, and you know, I understand that, but it just concerns me that there was such a strong elected councillor view on that one, that this one still shows it in there as a possibility. I personally would have liked to have seen it taken out, because I think there will be a big backlash to you as councillors if that goes through like that, because I think it will strengthen the case if it comes to an appeal. You know, so I think that's my concern. That was all, but thank you.
Yeah, Mark.
Shall I answer as you go? So thank you, Terry. Affordable housing, I agree, it's a really tricky one. I think it's about ambition, isn't it? The fact is, we've got to balance between the value we put on affordable housing and the value we put on infrastructure. We want it all, let's be fair. We want the whole lot. But so, even though we might build further affordable housing or higher numbers, we will lose something else. There's only so much money in the pot, but we've got to decide on what's important to us. And I think there's no doubt this administration and the previous one were very clear about the fact that affordable housing is what is the priority. The government have signalled that we can look at our own housing needs. It's a signal. It's not set in legislation. So, like you say, they could turn around. But it is our ambition to build what we need, not what others want us to build. Because the risk is, of course, as we've seen in the past, and many of you have had to look at yourselves, is that they get all these sites and they never build anything because they know they can't sell them, so there's no point building them. And in terms of Congsbury, well, the only thing I'll say currently, to give you some support, is it's still in the planning process. It comes back to your committee in one cycle, as they always do if it's a recommendation against officers. But we won't be churlish about it if there is no will to build this, because currently, you know, the site was for 70, they're trying to build 90. Councillors have already clearly stated they don't want to see that. We won't keep pushing it through. There's no way we'll push it through. It will be removed from the plan if it is not going to be built. So there's no point having it there. There's no point having undeliverable sites.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you. I wasn't criticising the 35% affordable housing. I was just expressing the frustration when we actually don't get any of it.
Okay, thank you very much. So I've now got Councillor Luke Smith.
Thank you, Chair. It's a rather brief and specific point. The vision statement for the plan states that regeneration will transform and breathe new life into existing towns. This is echoed and reinforced as a broad policy under efficient use of land, placemaking and sustainable development. With the limited sites available in the district, particularly in our towns, and the raising national awareness of the grey belt, has regeneration been considered to hold a policy in its own right to give us a more coherent approach? Because I'd hate for our ad hoc approach, where it's pegged on everywhere, to miss any future opportunities throughout the duration of the plan.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone want to particularly respond to... I mean, it's a point, really, for debate, isn't it, rather than necessarily... So I'm going to move on then. Councillor Bridget Petty.
Thank you. Echoing, as some people have said, but expanding upon, this has been a long process, and I take the work of the local plan very seriously. I consider it one of the most important ways that the council will shape the area of North Somerset over the next 15 years, impacting not only this generation, but also future ones. The work done on this document is significant, and there is a lot of excellent policy work which should ensure better homes and communities. So I want to thank the officers for all the work they've done on that. However, I want us to recognise how far we've come, and that still a council must work within the confines of national politics and priorities. Were the Green Party holding more seats, this would look different at a national level, and change is needed. A year ago, the housing target was set by national government at over 20,000 houses in this 15-year period. Councillors from all parties questioned this figure. They questioned if it matched the need, but also if it delivered on if it was deliverable in our landscape with flood risk, greenbelt, and scientifically important sites. I'm proud of the work we did to challenge this. I'm proud that we chose to seek the evidence on our needs for our communities, and that today we're working on a figure closer to 15,000 in total. A year ago, the list of sites was significant, and as a representative of Backwell, to have the village sandwiched between two proposed major new sites was inconceivable. To propose a new road transport link over the Nailsea and Backwell railway line in the Greenbelt was illogical and undeliverable in a climate emergency. In 2023, the plans for more major roads must stop. It is time we got a grip of car emissions and start properly planning for a future with cleaner air for our children and less congestion in our communities. I'm pleased that the road proposal is gone and that the residents of Backwell will not have their local Greenbelt covered in new houses, and the extension of Greenbelt between Nailsea and Backwell, which is important to both communities. I do recognise many will be disappointed that there remains a strategic site in the village, and I will push to reduce the negative impact it has on existing residents. The need for housing is not really about bricks and mortar. It is about delivering much more about affordable homes, whether rented or for sale. This country has been in a worsening housing crisis for over a decade. And while the generation before me could work hard and then afford a home, as house prices have increased more and more in society, we struggle to afford their homes. As a Green councillor, I'm dedicated to creating a fairer society in North Somerset, where more people have access to the homes they need, that they can afford to heat and run. The percentage of affordable housing to me was very important as a tool to ensure housing developers leave us with homes that we need and not just leave with their profits. I would like to see national reforms, but when we hear that 10% of the Conservatives' donations are from major house builders, I won't look to the government to deliver that reform. I'm satisfied that it was the right decision not to proceed with the local plan last year and push for better for our residents. I support an ambitious affordable housing target. I support community-led housing and a council who is ready to deliver better housing for its communities, where the market is failing to do so. Housing is a basic right. There is a lot of good in this local plan, and the policies developed by the officers with the councillors' input are really strong. So thank you very much for everybody who's worked on it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Okay, so I don't think I've got any other... Oh, yes, Councillor Peter Burden.
Thank you, Chairman. Very quick points. Most of the points I was going to make have already been made, and I congratulate the officers and particularly our executive member, who I think has carried out his role very well on this matter. On a straightforward technical point, is there going to be available a page 327 on this local plan that actually works? I'm referring to the map, and I've just tried, and I've tried many a time, to blow this map up to a sensible level to give detail, because as we all know with local plans, the devil is in the detail, and I can't make it work on my machine. and I would be quite useful if there was one available that would work. Also, I'm very, very glad about your comments about Kongsbury, because I think it would be a real faux pas for public consultation and a kick in the teeth for the public if the executive didn't take note of a unanimous decision of the planning committee if it continues to be the same as it is. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, we'll obviously look at the map issue and try and address that as best we can. So thank you for that, Peter. And I think on Kongsbury, the key message is we haven't changed it in the last 7 days, but absolutely we're listening to what PNR say. Okay, I've got, not yet, Mark. I've now got Annemieke and then Catherine.
Yes, just very brief. As what I think I can still say, a relatively new councillor, it was really daunting to be faced with 271 pages of the local plan. And it really does underline, when you read through it, the amount of work that's gone into developing it. So I would also like to express my gratitude to the staff who've done all this work. I did actually go through the whole plan. It took me several days. I can't say that I read every tiny individual word, but I did particularly want to read all those sections that I felt were relevant to my particular brief with climate, waste and sustainability, but also in terms of the housing and the types of housing that we are going to be developing for the residents of North Somerset. I just want to say that I think this is a very good plan, and I was really encouraged to see so many excellent mentions in there of how we are going to be dealing with climate change, with the effects of climate change, and how we will be preparing homes for our communities in the years to come. And I think it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Annemieke. And Councillor Catherine Gibbons.
Thank you. I'll be brief. I wasn't planning to speak to seconding the amendment, but I will say that I'm very pleased to do that. And like others, I want to thank the officers for all their hard work, particularly in responding to our recent and ongoing discussions on the local plan, because we've heard from a member of the public, Alan Rice, today about the challenges people have in applying for housing. But what he didn't reference is the fact that there's huge challenges in finding affordable housing, particularly in Western. So this is something that is very close to our heart as a Labour group, and for myself, you know, when I deal with families that have significant needs and cannot get the right sort of accommodation. So the fact that we've listened to people and we've adapted the plan and we're going for 38.5% affordable housing, and that's not a cap, that's a minimum aim. That doesn't prevent us from aiming to deliver even more. And I personally would support that and every effort that we have as an administration to explore other creative options to develop our own projects, which could actually offer 100% affordable housing within areas like Western, where the need is so great. So once again, thank you to everyone, and I also commend this plan. I think that I'm happy to be supporting this after so much work over 2 administrations. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Catherine. So I don't think there's anyone else. So just to add my thanks as well, I think it's been a really good process that we've gone through. Planning officers would probably say it's been quite a painful process in the sense that we've taken our time and we have had quite a few goes at it in terms of consultation and engagement. But I think you can see in this version that's now going to go out for that final round of consultation that we are reaping the rewards of taking our time and trying to get it right. You know, I think we have listened on the overall numbers. We have been able to deliver greater protection to the Green Belt. We have been able to identify new employment sites, which is going to help hopefully create more local jobs for people and reduce out commuting. We have been able to deliver stronger policies around tackling the climate emergency and building homes and businesses that are going to be fit for the future. And as we've just heard, we are going to deliver more affordable homes through the local plan than we did previously. So I think that's really positive, and there's lots of things to celebrate in this plan. My only cautionary note is to say it is ultimately a development plan. It is is a spatial plan for North Somerset, and it doesn't, on its own, control what happens in reality. And so let's not make the mistake of thinking that once we've landed the local plan, we've done it, because actually we've got a lot of hard work to do to make sure that some of these things become reality in the right kinds of ways, that we drive the development industry to deliver the kinds of things that we want, and as Catherine quite rightly said at the end there, that we deliver in our own land and in our own projects to the highest possible standards and aspirations that we can. So Mark, do you want to round us off and then we'll take the vote?
Yes, very quickly. First of all, just regarding regeneration in the local plan, of course, you know, those words are they haven't fallen on deaf ears, and we do have our placemaking strategies, and we do mention the regeneration sites within the local plan. But first, you know, importantly, I will still be talking to councillors and communities through this process. So I welcome those further conversations around issues that still concern councillors in the plan. So we're still doing that. That's not stopped. It was a pleasure to go to all the consultation meetings and public meetings earlier in the year, and I learned a huge amount around what people wanted, and the reality is people do want homes built. They really do want homes built. They just don't always want them built where the developer wants to build them. But you know, I think this plan gets us there. And just one thing for Councillor Burden I wanted to add. It is important that executive separates itself from the planning process, and I think that's something the last administration did, and I think this administration does. And as the executive member, I do not sit on planning for the exact reasons he says, and we do need to separate those. So I would like to see support for this plan today, and I think it's a significant move towards where we need to be. And again, I want to just reiterate again the fact that planning officers have done a fantastic job on this, and it's been a pleasure to work with them.
Thank you, Mark. So we've got the recommendations as printed in the paper, plus the additional ones that were moved by Jenna Homaris. So would colleagues please indicate their support or otherwise? I think that's unanimous. Great, thank you very much. Okay, so as I mentioned at the beginning, we're going to take items 10 and 11 at the end of the agenda. So I'm now moving on to item 12, which is the contract award for highway surfacing. So Councillor Hannah Young. Hannah, please.
Thank you, Mike. An equally exciting item, I think you'll find. Excuse me. So this is quite straightforward as a report. The recommendation is to award the contract for highway surfacing to John Wainwright & Co Limited for a term of 4 years, and no other options are considered. In November 2022, just as a little bit of background, full council made a resolution to award the cyclical and reactive maintenance contract to North Somerset Environment Company, NSEC, for an initial term of 7 years. And then to create 2 single provider frameworks to deliver carriage surfacing works and surface dressing works. And the carriage surfacing works is what is the subject of this decision. It also agreed at that point for Council in 2022 to create a dynamic purchasing system to procure the remaining elements of the highways service. And those were all steps that were intended to help us to increase the efficiency of our highways maintenance, and also to reduce the costs of it and to make us more flexible in our approach. You'll see that after market engagement and an initial self-selection stage, 5 suppliers were invited to tender. Subsequently, 2 suppliers retracted their tenders due to their internal resource challenges. Wainwright's scored highly across all sections of their submission. Their responses to each of the questions within the quality submission inspired confidence, fully met the specification, and clearly demonstrated their ability as an organisation to deliver this contract. An affordability assessment's been carried out, which shows the costs under the new arrangement are approximately 10% less than our current arrangement, due to directly commissioning from a provider rather than going through another contractor. That aligns with the overall business case that's been developed for a new highway service delivery model, which also aims to reduce the amount of capital borrowing required to deliver highways maintenance. So although the anticipated expenditure through the contract is likely to vary from year to year, depending on budgets and priorities, and the capital budget, of course, is approved as part of the capital strategy report, and is dependent on the amount of grant funding received. So in essence, those are the key points that I'd like to make, and I'd ask fellow executive members to approve the contract award as defined in the paper.
Thank you very much, Hannah. And can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Mark. It really is pleasing, isn't it, to see that we're delivering some efficiencies and cost savings effectively by cutting out the middleman and making our processes more streamlined. So that's really positive. And I was particularly pleased to see the quality scores being high, because I think one of the pieces of feedback we often get from residents is, you know, great, the work's been done, but has it always been done to the best possible standard? So really pleasing to see that approach. Okay, any questions or comments from anyone? I can't see any, so can colleagues indicate their support, please? Or otherwise, obviously. Thank you. I got criticised last time for not giving people the option of voting against, so sorry for that. I better test that each time, just in case. Okay, thanks very much, Hannah. Okay, so the next item is the medium-term financial plan update. So we're now on item 13 on the agenda. So this is an update report on our ongoing work to develop our medium-term financial plan for the next 4 years, and of course the budget for 24-25. Since the last report was presented, officers and members together have been working to develop a range of savings approaches and suggestions that we can include in the next phase of the development of our financial plan, because I think we're all acutely aware of how challenging the financial position is, not only in terms of the sustained inflationary and demand pressures that we are experiencing at the moment, but also, of course, against the backdrop of budget reductions that have run into the last 15 years, really. The report does set out how we've developed a strategy for closing the 50 million budget gap that we've got over the 4-year period, including allocating specific financial targets to areas within the budget, looking at how we can maximise our income and how we can obviously reduce the net costs of delivering some of our services. There'll be further reports in the coming months as we build on the feedback that we've received from councillors, town and parish councils, and also through residents and other stakeholders through our budget and MTFP engagement work that we've been doing over the last few months. So the report is just for noting, so I'll ask for a seconder to that, please. Thank you, Catherine. And any questions or comments or anything that section 1? Nope. Okay. Great. Okay. So noted. If you would indicate. Yep. Thank you very much. Okay. And to think that you thought you had the most exciting bit, Hannah. Come on. It's an end of cycle of finance reports. Okay. And the next one is obviously the capital strategy report. So item 14. So again, obviously in parallel to our revenue budget approach that we were just talking about, we do also have our capital strategy, and this paper updates on our overall approach on that, and also seeks specific approval from the executive to recommend to council the necessary increases that we have previously discussed around the programme to deliver the Banwell bypass. You'll see from the report that the council's current investment plans are already very extensive. So we've got a capital programme which now totals well over £400 million over the 5-year period 2023 to 2028. So I will seek a seconder for the recommendations, which is to note the progress on the strategy and the recommendations to council on the Banwell bypass. Thank you, Councillor Solomon. Any questions or comments? No? Okay, and is everyone content for that one to be? Thank you very much. Okay, and then the next one is the month 4 budget monitor. So this is obviously our monthly update on how we're doing with the in-year budget. So again, we've updated our forecast of planned spend across the year, and you can see that we're currently forecasting an overspend of £2.2 million, which is equivalent to about 1% of our revenue budget. Obviously, it's still relatively early in the financial year, so forecasts will shift as we continue to work on the areas of cost pressure and try and mitigate some of those. As with last month, it's similar issues that we're facing the greatest cost pressures, so children's services, where placement costs and particularly around disabled children's packages and community support are increasing. We're continuing to experience increased costs in waste disposal. We've also got the impact of the staff pay award, which has still not been agreed nationally. So all of those are weighing heavily on our in-year budget. But we're obviously continuing to work to mitigate those, and I'm sure that there'll be further progress to update colleagues on as we carry on through the financial year. So any questions or comments on anything in the Budget Monitor report? No? Okay, in which case I'm going to ask for a seconder for that. Thank you, Roger, Councillor. And all those in favour of that, please show. Thank you very much. Okay, and then we can move on to item 16, which is the North Somerset Safeguarding Adults Board Annual Plan. So I think we're going to have a presentation of that, but I'll ask Roger to come in first and introduce this, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. Safeguarding Adults Boards are a statutory duty under the Care Act 2014. To ensure robust scrutiny, North Somerset Council employed Teresa Bell as an independent chair. The purpose of a Safeguarding Adults Board is to help and safeguard adults who require care and support. The Safeguarding Adults Board is required to assure itself that local safeguarding arrangements are in place, to assure itself that safeguarding practice is person-centred and outcome-focused, to work collaboratively to prevent abuse and neglect, and to assure itself that safeguarding practice is continually improving and enhancing the quality of life of adults in its area. The report sets out both opportunities and challenges that face statutory agencies. It also shows examples of good practice and areas of development for adult safeguarding. It's important that the executive has oversight of our adult safeguarding activity, as well as having the opportunity to question the annual report and the activity presented within it. Unfortunately, the independent chair, Teresa Bell, cannot be here today, so I will now hand over to the board manager, who will be presenting the report on her behalf.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. My name is Nabila Marrow. I am the Safeguarding Adults Board Manager. Apologies again from Teresa Bell, who is unable to be here today to present this. So, given from that introduction, I'll continue on. So, the Safeguarding Adults Board have 3 core duties. They must develop and publish a strategic plan setting out how they will meet their objectives and how their member and partner agencies will contribute. Publish an annual report detailing how effective their work has been, and commission Safeguarding Adults reviews for any cases which meet the criteria for these. Our core partners are North Somerset Council, Avon and Somerset Police, Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucestershire Integrated Care Board. And our strategic priorities are preventative safeguarding, quality of care and support, transitional safeguarding, tackling adult exploitation, and tackling domestic abuse. These are all underpinned by our strategic intentions for 2023 to 2026, which are listening. We will ensure that the voices of people with lived experience are at the heart of our work to deliver positive outcomes. And learning, our priorities for action will be evidence-based on recommendations from Safeguarding Adults reviews, practice audits, by listening to the voices of people with lived experience and those of multi-agency professionals to provide a clear understanding of where there is risk in North Somerset. Challenging, we will work constructively in partnership to hold each other to account and to promote, embed and monitor effective multi-agency quality assurance processes to prevent abuse and neglect. And lastly, leading, we will actively demonstrate and promote collaboration and commitment to safeguarding. To highlight items contained in the annual report over the last year, the Safeguarding Adults Board has published 3 SARs including a thematic review of self-neglect, which are now available on the SAB website. In addition to this, there is the SAR of Abby and Kim, as well as Colin. We have also recruited a highly experienced independent chair and a permanent business manager, Elizabeth Langson, for whom I now cover while she is on maternity leave. We have also redeveloped and restructured the board's attendance, including across our 6 subgroups. Our well-established subgroups have been able to refocus their intentions, while some of our other groups had a renewal in membership, with the inclusion of an entirely new subgroup, the Communications and Community Engagement subgroup. Moving forward, both the Adults and Children's Partnership Boards intend to merge some of our subgroups to centralise information and provide better working stability, with conversations currently underway. And just to highlight some other items from the annual report, from within safeguarding in social care. They have met their strategic intention to transitional safeguarding and trauma-informed practice. They have achieved an improvement from inadequate to requires improvement, and majority of contracted services at 88% are rated good. There's also been a wellness service which offers which is offered as a free to residents of North Somerset over the age of 18, which reduces social isolation, signposts people to wider community resources where appropriate, and maintains a person's independence in the community. There's also long-term homelessness solutions, which recognises there is not one solution, which also uses a variety of organisations and methods to improve rough sleeping and homelessness across North Somerset. Avon and Somerset Police have also achieved an inspection rated adequate in the area of protecting vulnerable people under police efficiency, effectiveness and legitimacy. And the BNSSG ICB has continued to develop and provide training for primary care colleagues. There's a current recruitment of 3 deputy designated roles in strengthening the capacity of the designated nurse role. And there is further joint working across the Safeguarding Adults Board, and they are taking learning from the recent LGA review, improving methods of enabling increased representation and attendance by health service staff at North Somerset Adult Safeguarding meetings. Thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thanks very much. Thank you for that report. Really helpful overview of the work of the Safeguarding Adults Board, and really appreciate you taking the time to come along and represent. And please do pass on our thanks to the collective board for all their hard work and engagement. Okay, so Roger, I'm taking, will have moved the recommendation, which is to note the report. Can I have a seconder for that one, please? Thank you, Councillor Young. So all those happy to note... Oh, sorry, any questions or comments on anything in the report? Nope. Okay, thank you very much. So all those in favour of noting that? Thank you very much. Okay, so next we're on to item 17, which is the performance and risk update report. So I'm not absolutely sure whether our head of business insight is planning to speak to this, but just to say, in the absence of a signal to the contrary. Oh, are you going to do it? Oh, right. Okay, great. In which case, I'm going to hand over to Amy, our Director of Corporate Services, to introduce this one. Thank you.
Sorry, Mike, and Emma sends her apologies. She's busy coding consultation responses from our corporate plan consultation. So, yes, the risk management and performance update is the quarterly performance report that we bring forward to the executive. So, just to let you all know, this is regularly monitored through our performance management framework, through the leadership team and with executive members on a one-to-one basis. But we take this opportunity to publish formally into the executive meeting. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments on the individual performance items, but otherwise the reports for noting.
Thanks very much, Amy. And just to encourage everybody, you know, please do look at this. This is an important document in terms of measuring and assessing our impact and performance. So I would really encourage exec colleagues to use it, and policy and scrutiny panel chairs to use the report to inform some of their work plans and help to focus on the right areas. Any questions or comments from anyone on this plan? Nope. Okay, thank you. So I'll move that we note it. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Catherine. All in favour, please? Thank you very much. Okay, then we've got item 18, which again is for noting, and that's the draft calendar of meetings for 2024-2025. So obviously it feels like an eternity away, doesn't it, in terms of setting these dates, but it's just an opportunity for us to put them in the public domain and test those times and dates. So obviously if colleagues have got any thoughts or issues, please do feed that back to Democratic Services colleagues. You'll note that we are attempting to try and consider different time slots for the executive meetings and potentially different venues. And I appreciate the work that Democratic Services staff are doing to try and identify some of those opportunities for us for next year. So I'll move that we note those. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Roger. And all in favour? Thank you very much. Okay. I will take oral reports, item 19, just in case there aren't any. So has anyone got any oral updates that they'd like to make? Yes, Councillor Solomon, Mike Solomon.
Just an oral update that while we've been sat here, there's a drama unfolding at the Marine Lake because an angry seal is in there and we've had to close it and call in some help to get this poor angry seal out of our Marine Lake.
Well, yes, exactly. It's good to see that the outdoor water facilities in Weston-super-Mare are being appreciated. Exactly so. Right. Okay. Any other oral comments from any colleagues? Oh, yes, Catherine.
Yeah, just a quick one to mention to colleagues and anyone else listening that at the moment we have the North Somerset Day of Send ongoing up at Priory School. This is a fantastic event that's been organised largely by our Parent Carers Forum and, of course, ourselves and partners. So if anybody has the time to go up there after this meeting, please do, because it's well worth it. I know that when I went up there this morning, I learned that there'd been over 700 sign-ups to attend for professionals, but also parents. So it's a great event, and I hope it will be replicated. And later on, some of us will be up there answering questions.
Thanks very much, Catherine. Okay, so I've got no other colleagues. So we're now turning to items 10 and 11. So item 10 is the Bus Service Improvement Plan Update Report, and item 11 is the Design and Build Report. So just to signal that we will take the update report, and Councillor Hannah Young will speak to both of these in a moment, but we will take the update report and the decisions and recommendations in that report. But when we get to item 11, we will then formally adjourn the meeting until a later date, because we want a little bit of further time to consider the design and build report. So what we're going to be doing is adjourning that item until a later meeting, which will be confirmed by Democratic Services in due course, but is likely to be in the week beginning the 30th of October. But if I can hand over to Hannah to speak to the update report and just give a little bit of background on where we are with item 11 as well. Thanks, Hannah.
Thank you, Mike. That's really helpful. So this is a quite lengthy report, the Bus Service Improvement Plan update. Very broad, gives a whole range of information about progress that's been made since the award of the funding that was provided for this Bus Service Improvement Plan last year in November. I'd like to say a big thank you to the 4 officers responsible for this report and for a huge amount of work that's going on, both with the wider improvement plan and specifically to deal with local services around buses in North Somerset, and that's Bella Fortune, Carl Nicholson, Rob Thompson and Maria Davidson, but also the wider team who are involved on a day-to-day basis. I've started to talk about this plan. Bus Service Improvement Plan is a national term. So we are stuck with it. But actually, the more you understand about this piece of work, it's really about creating a sustainable bus network in the future. This is limited term funding, which we have for a 2-year period. Some of it has already been extended to a 2.5-year period. But it's all designed, very importantly, to mean that we can build a sustainable operating bus network across North Somerset. We've already come some way since COVID, when actually the bus service was obviously very, very significantly affected by lockdown. And so in many ways, this has been a recovery piece of work. But I think because some of our services were lost some time ago, there's obviously a huge drive amongst our local communities to want to see improvements in our bus network. I'm also acutely conscious that we're actually performing an awful lot better than many areas of the country that have lost services almost completely and left people stranded. So while we have a long way to go, I think we're actually in a much better place compared than some of our neighbouring authorities. That will be little comfort to residents who are waiting for buses right now, but there are people working really hard to make that happen. The report, as you'll see, has 5 recommendations. It includes information about how we work with operators through our new enhanced partnership. And one of my learnings since I took on this role for the executive on highways and transport has been what an enhanced partnership really is. And I think that's something that, although it sounds a bit like jargon, is really important for people to understand. We have entered a legal agreement with a number of partners, our neighbouring local authorities, the West of England Combined Authority, our service operators and a range of other transport providers. And we have all signed up with them to try to work together to improve the bus network and the bus services through a whole range of different work streams. So we have committed ourselves to working alongside others to make sure that people get the best service that we can provide, the best passenger experience, that we increase reliability of buses, that we increase consistency and frequency of buses, and that we have the road infrastructure to enable them to run effectively. There are 5 recommendations within the paper. They range across the capital improvements that we'd like to make to the road network to help buses run more efficiently and effectively, right through to some of the other work streams around fares packages, so the reductions in fares, and also the branding and how people can see and understand how to access the transport network. So the 5 recommendations are to approve the communications and engagement approach for the BSIP capital programme, which is the series of proposals for the new road changes, to approve the new West branding, which replaces Travel West as the West of England brand for integrated travel, to approve delegations on the reallocation of grant between the BSIP work streams, and you'll see that there's an appendix to the report, which is a piece of work that was commissioned by North Somerset with WECA, which was undertaken by KPMG to look at value for money of the various work streams within the programme, and where if we had money that was saved from one work stream would be a good investment to try to continue to encourage people to use buses in future and enable them to do it. The 4th recommendation is to make an expression of interest for Zebra programme. So alongside Mike Seal in the Marine Lake, we will have I'm so sorry. Very bad joke. Zero emission bus regional areas funding. So we have obviously huge aspiration, ambition to meet our climate emergency targets and to become carbon neutral by 2030, helping others within the commercial sector through the funding that we can obtain with them through Zebra funding to be able to decarbonise buses is a really important piece. So zero emissions is a really important thing that we want to do. So this would give officers permission to apply for that funding, and also delegating authority to myself to make the updates to the BSIP MOU, which is part of our agreement with WECA and is subject to annual review. I just wanted to say before I open it up to questions that the paper does explain in some detail why we're taking the approach that we are, but I did want to highlight that I don't think many people are fully aware of the amount of money that we're putting into, through this funding that we've received, enhancing specific bus services across our network. So you will see within the paper almost 3 million this year in making sure that there are services either increased in frequency or existing at all on some of our routes. And that includes routes such as the A1, which is now a 15-minute service, for example, and wouldn't be if we weren't putting that money into the services. Over 2 years, that's £5.2 million. Now, if by the end of that 2-year period, all of the work that we're doing hasn't created a network that is vibrant and supported by our commercial operators, we will not, as a council, have 5.2 million to put into the next 2 years. So what we're trying to achieve is a network that is attractive to customers, so they want to take the buses to passengers, that it's attractive to commercial operators, so they want to run the buses for us, that is sufficiently well patronised that we have fares that are kept relatively low because the service is commercially viable, and therefore the service will be sustainable and run after that 2-year period. And at the moment, the North Somerset supports a very small number of services where there are clearly parts of our community where it will never be a commercially viable prospect to run a bus service. But nevertheless, bus services are really important. We have a very small amount of funding which we allocate for supported services currently. So we can't afford to support services in future that could become commercial. And already a large amount of government funding is going direct through these plans to commercial operators to help them to develop commercial services. Personally, I would like to see those services not within commercial hands, because I think they're fundamental to our communities, but that is the legal framework that we are working within and that we have to work within. Local authorities, as many of you will know, are not allowed to run buses, so this is how we have to do things currently. The road infrastructure changes, which we've been beginning to talk to local ward members and towns and parish councils about, and plan to do a series of additional engagement and consultation around, which is described within the paper, are really, really important to the plan. And there is scope within the next piece of work that we want to undertake to go out and talk to people more fully about the proposals and the designs that have been put together so far. Of course, there is scope to look at those, to get the wisdom of communities, to see whether they need to be amended, to see whether they're viable before we move forward with them. But they are so important to developing a network in future. And the reason for that, and you'll see in the paper, is that minutes save buses. And I know we've faced a lot of questions recently about, is this significant investment worth it, given that you might only save a couple of minutes here and a couple of minutes there at a particular junction? Now, we need to make sure, of course, that any changes we make, we get right and they achieve what the benefit that we need them to achieve. But the minutes that add up essentially enable us, or enable commercial operators, to be able to take a bus out of that route, a bus which costs approximately £300,000 to run, and to still achieve the same frequency of buses going around the route, and therefore significantly reduce their operating costs. And that is one of the things that will enable our service to become more sustainable in time. And the benefit for customers, for passengers, is that they will have frequent buses available to them, and reducing congestion points means that buses will be more reliable. We can more reliably say that something will hit the time it was supposed to be at a timetabled point. And the one thing I get a lot of feedback about is people will not use buses if they're not reliable. That's one of the number one things that people need of their bus service. So the infrastructure changes are very, very strongly related to bus reliability and sustainability. And I think sometimes people are seeing this as two separate projects, but I just want to emphasise how important it is that we do all parts of this programme, and that we don't just concentrate on the elements that are about supporting services, because what that will do is have huge costs for us in future if it's the route that we take. Now, we have a lot of work to do, and the paper describes the engagement that will take place if these recommendations are approved, and we continue to talk to communities about the work that we want to take forward. in light of the breadth of the information in that paper and some of the information that we've had back, it's a complex piece of work. There's a small amount of additional information we want before we go ahead with the contract award. Hence, Mike has said we're going to adjourn to receive that information before we come back to actually award the contract for the infrastructure schemes. But I would welcome the support of the executive on the 5 recommendations within this paper so that we can continue at pace with the wider programme and continue to work as hard as we can to get the buses that the local residents need of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. So can I have a seconder for those recommendations? Thank you, Catherine. I would just, echo everything that Hannah has said, but I wanted to particularly say, firstly, that I think we all recognise the hard work that our officers have put into this whole bus service improvement plan programme, not just in terms of what we're doing now, in terms of the delivery, some of which Hannah has articulated, but also let's not forget the great success that we had in securing one of the most successful bus service improvement plan financial awards from government in the country. So we're in an extremely strong position, and a huge amount of hard work has gone into developing that. And this update report talks about big wins and big positive steps that are already taking place to improve bus services in North Somerset. And I think it's particularly pleasing to see really strong articulation in this report of our commitment to engagement and communication. We know that we haven't always got that right in terms of the programme so far, because of the pace at which we're working and the complexity of some of the schemes. So I'm really pleased to see that we're reiterating and underlining our commitment to get out there and engage with communities and help all of us to understand the plan and to try and get it right. We've got the Zebra scheme, which is about delivering those zero-emission bus improvements in terms of the buses that are operating in North Somerset, and it's really pleasing that we've got a strong relationship with First and a commitment for sustained long-term investment to give us greener buses as well as more frequent and reliable buses. But we all recognise that this is a one-off opportunity to do things differently in terms of our bus services here in North Somerset, and so it is absolutely incumbent on us to go the extra mile, if that's not the wrong terminology, in terms of trying to get it right and do things that we really know are going to deliver those benefits for the long term for North Somerset. And that's why on some of this, I'm really going to strain the motoring metaphors now, sorry. We really have got our foot to the floor in terms of delivering some of this, but it's right that we apply, I'm going to do a handbrake turn on some of this and get it and try and just make sure that we are correct and that it is definitely going to deliver the improvements that we want in the longer term. I think I would also pay tribute to officers and to Hannah as the lead member in terms of navigating the complexity of this, because I think the other thing that we have to recognise is that we are working in a joint relationship with the West of England Combined Authority and the other unitary authorities in the West of England. So it's not even as simple as we make decisions here in North Somerset and we can definitely deliver it, because we've got that process of negotiation and discussion with our partners and with the Department of Transport to navigate as well. So I really applaud the effort that has gone into this, and we've just got to make sure that we're focusing on those important wins for the sustainable improvement in bus services that we all want to see. Okay, so I've got Councillor Bridget Petty and then Councillor Steve Bridger to speak. So Bridget.
Thank you, Hannah. I think I'm really keen, I'm really happy to hear what you've been saying and what Mike has been saying about the local engagement and the engagement intention. Sorry, do you have it in front of you, the first recommendation? Because are you agreeing to an engagement plan, but then I can't find the engagement plan that you're agreeing to? And so I'm just trying to fully understand so that I can help manage expectations for our communities. And I'll just finish with because I guess I'm coming from this context of we have this vast amount of money with a very, as I understand it, specific hard deadline. And I think the community has been made aware that this hard deadline is spring 2025. But in this document, we are saying that we are committed to communicating and engaging with our communities. And I'm just, because of this very finite period that we're working in, I actually think that what we need now is really specifics on you will be communicated with in this month, because we expect to come and start digging stuff in this month. And that's where I'm struggling with that too. Do you see what I mean? There's that two space, and what do we have in front of us now? And are we still talking hypotheticals and headlines, or are we starting to talk detail?
Yeah, so I said at the beginning it's a fast-moving plan. So when this, and you'll be aware, obviously, of how long in advance these papers have to be produced in order to be able to come to a meeting such as this. So what the paper describes is an approach to communications and engagement, which talks about the sorts of things that will be happening in the key areas. And that includes a level of information for some areas, much more detailed consultation in areas where more people are affected or there are specific issues that we're aware of, and also and a whole range of different methods that might be used, but that being bespoke to each area depending on the needs. Now, one of the difficulties I think we've faced is because the grant award was made late and we had to compress a 3-year programme into 2 years. Initially, before I joined the executive, there was a decision last year to go on the first 7 schemes were commissioned through a different contract, and some of that work, people are aware, has already took place. I'm sure we're all aware of some of those schemes. Now moving forward, the next batch of schemes, I think Mike has already touched on it. We want to get right and we want to do them differently. So there have been some issues, significant issues with communication and engagement. Some of them caused by the fact that, for example, the broccoli scheme, which is currently ongoing, was brought forward in the programme having been planned to be done some way down the line. So I think the notice that people got of that was surprising to them, and that shouldn't have taken place, and that won't happen again. Over the past few weeks since this paper was first developed, I've been joining every meeting that the team have been having with ward councillors and with parish and town councils to have initial conversations. I think there has been some nervousness that might be the only thing that we're doing. Actually, that's just a first engagement in order to then develop a plan to engage with each area. So there is, and again, we touched on the additional information that I'd requested and that we have been requesting as we go through. There is a full draft engagement plan now for every area that's listed as a scheme here. And that will be further developed over the next few days and weeks, so that we can get that information out to ward members around month by month, what's in the plan and how will that work. The programme also has been extended. We have had the Department for Transport have agreed that the infrastructure elements can be delivered up to September 2025. So that is what we're working to on those. And I think we've said already that there is a process. If we, we want to deliver these schemes, we do, but we don't want to do things that are not going to work, and we are at the early stages. So if we do a consultation and find that actually we're not convinced that something's going to work, then there is a process. We go back to the Department for Transport and we say we can't do it and we're not going to do this. So it's not a case that because we've awarded a contract to design a number of schemes that we don't have the flexibility to say, actually, we have a choice here. And I've mentioned that in engagements with parish councils, and it's how we will do things. We've got to work as we go along.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. And Steve Bridger, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Hannah. I'd like to echo what Mike is saying. Hannah, I think you're doing a fantastic job. It's a really, really tough portfolio. And thanks too for the officers doing a sterling job, particularly considering that we're talking about moving goalposts here. The government have moved the goalposts in the last few months, haven't they? Lots to digest in this report. It's trying to do a lot. I think it's an update report, but it's also it's an update and prioritisation report, isn't it? Because there's the chunky stuff there about prioritisation. A similar report went to the WECA at the beginning of this month. I think they called their report a BSIP prioritisation report. We're obviously adding in lots of extra bits and pieces in this document. I think three things I wanted to say. The first thing really is both you, Bridget, and Hannah, you both talked on, which is around I think what this report does really well is make that case for change. So that mantra, save minutes to save buses, I really like. It hasn't cut through with the public yet, has it? I think we've not previously linked the sort of the BSIP capital investment, as you were saying, Hannah, as a council, although we're making as a council closely enough with the BSIP revenue investment. They have been to a certain extent treated as two separate things. Everything we say about a particular prioritisation scheme obviously also has to sort of put that in the bigger context. And so I applaud the kind of things you're saying, and Bridget has also touched on it. So this report does that. So it's good to see. In terms of first bus, obviously we're in a particular situation where one particular commercial operator has a virtual monopoly in our district. I was really pleased that the council called out first in September when they kind of let us down, really, because we're doing our bit. But as you were saying, every party to the enhanced partnership needs to invest, particularly as first, as you were saying, they are receiving government support separately for their business. I think, to turn that into a question, can I be reminded, I think, of what are the legally binding commitments on bus operators within the enhanced partnership scheme? I think the report talks about bus operators are expected to share the investment risk, but expected to doesn't necessarily translate into that they will do. In other words, what kind of leverage do we have with First so they commit to a greater frequency of service and not simply allow them to remove a vehicle if we speed things up on the route? Obviously, every route is different, and that might make sense in some cases, but there will be, we will want them to put more buses on to increase the frequency of some services. So, otherwise, I think people will feel, when I say people, I mean residents, will feel that First Bus are benefiting from a lot of taxpayer investment, which potentially might be wasted down the line. I wanted also to briefly address recommendation 3. And this is about delegations. So I recognise, as you're saying, this is all very fast moving. It's time limited, as Bridget was saying. Both officers and you, Hannah, will have, you'll be responding to the data. You'll be listening to feedback, reviewing budgets, making adjustments. There'll be forecast underspends and all that kind of thing. That's absolutely right that you should do that. In my view, however, and I think one or two in the chamber will know from exchanges we had earlier in the month, I think the extremely high levels of delegation in recommendation 3, so that's potentially reallocating between nudging 4 million to 7 million pounds of BSIP revenue funding. That's a lot of cash. It's, I think, pushing the council scheme of delegation to the limit. It's a really chunky delegation, and obviously Nick will have the final view on that. So what am I saying? We're not in call-in territory or anything like that, but I think we do need to factor in some scrutiny oversight of that process. We've had some good scrutiny, I think, some really good scrutiny of the capital element. Revenue, not so much. We had a report that came to the TCC panel in July, but it was mainly around Westlink performance and not the other stuff. I didn't know this the KPMG prioritisation study piece of work was happening. Obviously, this, as a result of that, there's some underspends or potential underspends forecast, and what's being talked about here is the flexibility that we now have as a council with our WECA partners to move some of that money around. So but that is a big deal. This BSIP is a big deal for not just the executive, obviously, but non-executive members too. I think lots of us. So we've got an informal scrutiny steering group set up, to which I can invite all members actually to that meeting. That would provide a mechanism through which elected members can be further informed on what potentially the council want to do in terms of redistributing some of that money within the overall BSIP envelope. So it's nothing personal. You're doing a fantastic job. It's just I think we do need scrutiny and non-exec sort of the ability for non-exec members to influence some of that, where some of that money is reallocated, because we are talking a lot of money, £4 to £7 million. And then one final, sorry to get a bit nerdy on process and protocol. Anyone would think I've been a councillor for 40 years, not 4. But in terms of not this report, but the report we need to submit annually to the Department for Transport, which I know is a separate thing. The report talks about a delegation from February this year, which it's in 3.3. The next annual update will be completed in December 2023, and the approvals have been delegated to the Executive Member for Highways and Transport by the Executive Committee in February 2023. I don't think it was, okay? I was there. I think we delegated responsibility for the approval of that particular, I think it was the December 2022 iteration of that report to the then executive member, but it wasn't a permanent delegation. So again, that might be something you might not necessarily need to respond to now, Hannah, and by all means, Nick will have a view on that too. But I think that in February we didn't make the delegation permanent. So again, if that's something that needs to be looked at, then ask you to do that, please. But thanks for listening to all of that.
Before you respond to that, can I just come back on the delegations point around the funding packages? So I think there's two things. So I hear what you say, Steve, and we've obviously had a bit of an email exchange about this. I think the two things I would say is, firstly, it absolutely is within the existing scheme of delegation. I think the proposal that's in the recommendation, because the important point here is that we're not talking about a single project and a single package of work that might be £7 million. We're talking about a range of spending, which could be nil, by the way, because we're only estimating what the financial flexibility for movement could be, and it might not transpire that there's any flexibility at all. But actually, when you break down some of those individual packages, it'll absolutely within the existing delegations and approvals. But the more important point is, and I would say exactly the same thing, so anybody who was at the West of England Combined Authority meeting would know that there was a similar going around in circles around the 3 unitary authorities who also wanted to have control and influence over some of those decisions. The point is, this is not something that North Somerset is deciding unilaterally on its own. We're doing that in negotiation with the Combined Authority and with the Department for Transport. And what we can't have is reaching an agreement between those 3 parties about what we're going to do with some of the funding, and then have to come back to 3, 4, 5 or more bodies and double check it and sense check it all over again. So I think it is important that we have a clear decision-making framework and delegated authority to Hannah and the Section 151 officer. However, and what Hannah's going to say now, I'm sure, is, but that's not the same as, what do we do to make sure that we are engaging with scrutiny panels, with elected members and with others to make sure that we're making the right decisions and that we're reflecting the priorities that we would have as a council. So that's not the same. So whilst we definitely will not change the recommendation in terms of the delegations, I'm sure Hannah is now going to say, very happy to have some of those conversations and engage appropriately.
Can I just...
of course, yeah, go on.
Yeah, I'm not asking to change the recommendation because we had that exchange. It's just, and I just want to say, scrutiny can work with the timescales.
Yeah.
But we need to slot but it's not expressly mentioned in the report, so I would like that kind of, like to hear your response, and if it potentially be put on the public record as well, that we can basically slot some scrutiny without upsetting the apple cart into the process. That would be, I think, the right thing to do.
Yeah. I'll take that point first. You had 3 questions, Steve, but on the scrutiny, yes, very open to scrutiny on that. Very happy to work with you about the timescales. I think it's really, really helpful process to have a wider group of councillors involved and looking at those things. But of course, Mike's already said the complex arena that we're working in, and we are negotiating all the time, so we don't always get exactly what we want. We hopefully get a large proportion of it, but we can't guarantee that what we decide here is what we actually end up with. So yes, absolutely. Let's get as much. One of my missions actually is to get as many people as possible understanding what we're trying to do with this programme and being involved and having their say within it. Because I think one of the problems that we've had so far is that people don't really understand our role in trying to influence and create the service that we want for all of our residents in the future, and some of the constraints that we're operating under. And I'm sure there's a wealth of wisdom in communities about how we can do things better. But it's quite a complex conversation to have. So the more that we can do that, the better from my point of view. And if scrutiny can help, fantastic. You asked a question about FIRST and what they are required to do and what they're signed up to and how far that we can hold them to account on that. The sort of formal answer is there's a whole list of specifically what their commitments are in the appendices to the actual enhanced partnership, which we can certainly share so people are clear. The less formal answer is that we are, as I say, we're legally part of this enhanced partnership. It's a framework that will exist in the future, even beyond the time that the BSIP money is gone. It's the legal framework in which we're now operating, unless and until we decide to operate in a different framework. And there are 1 or 2 different things that could be chosen under the current legal framework. Not one for discussion today, but how can we guarantee then that they that they don't just take the profits, I think was the implication of what you're saying. If we make the infrastructure changes, that is part of our relationship and our set of commitments that are within that enhanced partnership. And the purpose of review and annual review and changing where we need to is to make sure that those are up to date with what we need them to commit to in that agreement and negotiation and partnership with what they need us to do. So we can see that those will change, and I fully anticipate they will change over the course of the next couple of years and beyond in the enhanced partnership. I think there's a little bit of a difference between those longer term commitments and I think how we deal with FIRST around performance, because I think that's a great frustration amongst communities. How do we hold FIRST to account if we're putting money into services now? And I think we are, that we've certainly been working closely with FIRST, and you'll have seen from press releases, issued letters to them to be able to exert what influence we can to improve performance. And I would say our officers on a daily basis are talking and negotiating with officers in FIRST where there are specific issues on services and to help problem solve what to do next. And I don't often do this, but hot off the press, like my colleague here, I've received just during the meeting that we know there have been particular problems in the services, the service change in September that were made around service reliability, particularly for the 7 and the X1. And we've had daily issues around that, and as part of our enhanced partnership framework, we can only make changes to the service in April and in September for consistency. We've been pushing to say we know that there's a glitch in one of these timetables, we really need to change it, because otherwise we're at peak times we're going to find buses getting congested on 2 at once and then people waiting 45 minutes. Can we change it in January? We know what the issue is. It's a little tweak. And First have just agreed to do that, I understand, and we're allowed to go ahead with it. So hopefully that will have some immediate improvements on punctuality of that particular service. So all of those issues, performance issues, are being picked up. I think we've got a challenge about how we communicate what we're doing to communities and how we inspire confidence that we are really working as hard as we can for them. And if there are other things we can do, of course we will do them. But yes, so, and scrutiny, I think, has a role to play in that too, and one that I'd be very happy to continue talking and exploring. I think the third one was delegations, and I think probably all has been said on that it needs to be said.
Yeah, I think the only thing is, I think you've got a fair comment around the delegations for the DFT reporting, so we will reflect on that and pick that up to tidy up that issue accordingly.
Actually, sorry, there was one last thing, which is in terms of the allocation and what funds might be available. One of the things that drives how much might be available is when we offer a fares package, we don't necessarily know how many people are going to avail themselves of that package. And so we allocate a budget for it, but actually if people don't take the bus, we don't have to pay the amount that basically covers the fare. Now, what I would really love is everybody to be using the birthday bus offer, because it would get people onto buses, get them used to buses, and then we wouldn't have any gap in the budget, which would be reallocated to something else. At the moment, it's not hitting quite what we would like it to. There's a lot of usage of it, but actually it could be more. So that's one thing. Secondly, we have an option, which has only just come to us in the last few weeks, that we might be able to use some of that budget underspend to extend the fares element, the enhanced services beyond the current deadline. Now that decision is yet to be taken. It's still being discussed with WECA colleagues and so on, but that is one option, and it means it would give us more time. So that cliff edge that I've talked about, that we're spending 5.2 million at the moment, and what happens at the end of that period, we may be able to use some of that budget underspend to give us a bit more time to make a sustainable bus network, which seems a very attractive option. Now, we're not at the stage of making the decision yet, but it's something that we can certainly talk to people more widely about and consider, what's the appropriate use of that money, and you'll see more information about that too in the KPMG report. So watch this space.
Okay, thank you very much. So I can't see any other colleagues have signalled. So we've had a good debate there. So just to be clear, we've had a mover and a seconder for the recommendations that are set out in item number 10, which is the Bus Service Improvement Plan update report. So if colleagues could indicate their support or otherwise. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. And then just to confirm, we are then adjourning item 11, which is the contract award of design and build for BSIP until a further meeting, likely to be in the week beginning the 30th of October. Okay, in which case, thank you very much for your participation and energy this afternoon, and I am happy to close the meeting at 4:17.